How to talk to anyone, anywhere. Your practical guide to confident conversation, effortless charisma, witty small talk, and building real connections that last, by Vivian Crane. Introduction. On the evening of September 26, 1960, a man named Richard Nixon stood in a television studio in Chicago. He was the Vice President of the United States. He was a brilliant man who had spent years studying laws, history, and the art of debate. He knew every fact. He had every answer ready. But as the bright studio lights began to hum, something was wrong. Nixon had recently been in the hospital for a knee injury. He was tired, and he had lost weight. He chose to wear a light gray suit that blended into the gray walls behind him. When the makeup artist offered to help him look better for the cameras, he said no. He looked pale, and a thin layer of sweat began to form on his upper lip. Across from him stood a young senator named John F. Kennedy. Kennedy looked different. He was tan from spending time outdoors. He wore a dark suit that made him stand out against the background. Most importantly, he looked right into the camera lens. He wasn't just talking to the people in the room. He was talking to the millions of people sitting on their couches at home. He smiled. He looked relaxed. He looked like he was having a simple conversation with a friend. When the debate ended, two different things happened. People who listened to the debate on the radio thought Richard Nixon had won. They heard his facts and his logic. But the millions of people who watched it on television thought John F. Kennedy had won by a landslide. This moment changed history forever. It wasn't because one man was smarter than the other. It was because one man understood how to connect. Kennedy knew that what you say is only a small part of the story. How you look, how you stand, and how you make people feel is what stays with them. The hidden gap. Most of us feel like Richard Nixon sometimes. We have the right ideas. We do good work. We are kind people with a lot to offer. But when it comes time to step into the light and talk to others, something gets stuck. Maybe you're at a party and you see a group of people laughing. You want to join them, but you don't know how to walk over without feeling like a stranger. Maybe you're at work and you know you deserve a promotion, but the person who gets noticed is the one who knows how to chat with the boss in the break room. This is what many call the social skills gap. It is the distance between who you are on the inside and how people see you on the outside. For many people, this gap feels like a wall. You might spend 20 minutes in your car, rehearsing exactly what you are going to say before you walk into a meeting or a date. You might replay a conversation in your head for hours after it is over, wishing you had said something funnier or smarter. This struggle is common, but it's also very quiet. We live in a world where we spend more time looking at screens than looking at faces. We send texts instead of making calls. We use emojis instead of smiles. Because of this, the simple act of talking to another human being has started to feel like a performance instead of a joy. If you feel like you missed the day in school when everyone else was given a social instruction manual, you are not alone. There is a hunger today for something deeper than digital likes. People are lonely. Even though we are more connected than ever through the internet, many people feel like they are living on the edges of their own lives. They want to move from the outside of the circle to the center. They want to be seen, heard, and understood. The science of feeling safe. You might think that some people are just born with it. You see the person who can walk into a room of strangers and have everyone laughing in 5 minutes. You think they have a special gift that you don't have. A few years ago, researchers at Google started a project called Project Aristotle. They wanted to find out why some teams were very successful while others failed. They looked at the smartest people, the best leaders, and the most money. But none of those things were the secret. The secret was something called psychological safety. The best teams were the ones where people felt safe to talk. They felt safe to be silly, to ask dumb questions, and to share their ideas without being judged. The most successful groups weren't the ones with the highest IQs. They were the ones with the best social connections. This book is based on the idea that conversation is not a magic trick. It is a craft. Just like learning to cook, or code a computer, or play the guitar, you can learn the mechanics of how people connect. You can learn how to build a social bridge that lets you walk into someone else's world and invites them into yours. A man named Leo. To understand how these skills work in the real world, we need to look at someone who is right in the middle of this trouble. Leo Vance is 32 years old. He lives in a clean, quiet studio apartment in Seattle. He works as a senior software engineer for a tech company. Leo is very good at his job. If there is a bug in the code, Leo can find it. If a server goes down at 2 in the morning, Leo is the one people call to fix it. But Leo has a problem. He is professionally invisible. Every morning, Leo walks into the office and heads straight for his desk. He wears large headphones so he doesn't have to talk to anyone. When he needs a cup of coffee, he peeks around the corner of his cubicle. If he sees his boss or a group of coworkers laughing in the kitchen, he waits. He stays at his desk and stares at his screen until the kitchen is empty. In his head, Leo is actually very funny. He observes everything. He has witty jokes and deep thoughts about the books he reads. But when someone actually speaks to him, his brain feels like it glitches. He gives short, one-word answers. He looks at his shoes. He worries that his hands are shaking or that he has something on his face. Last week, a younger engineer named Sarah got the promotion that Leo wanted. Sarah isn't better at coding than Leo. In fact, she often asks Leo for help. But Sarah knows how to talk. She knows how to tell a story about her weekend that makes the team feel like a family. She knows how to ask the CEO a question in the elevator without sounding scared. Leo's parents back in Ohio always ask him why he isn't putting himself out there. They want him to find a girlfriend and make new friends. Leo wants those things too. But to Leo, putting himself out there feels like jumping out of a plane without a parachute. He believes that charisma is something you are born with, like blue eyes or being tall. He thinks small talk is a waste of time, and that he is just destined to be the quiet guy in the back of the room. Leo is a spectator in his own life, watching everyone else build connections, while he stays on the sidelines. Through this book, we are going to follow Leo as he tries to change. He is going to learn that the noise in his head, the fear of being awkward, is something he can turn down. He is going to learn that he doesn't have to be a different person to be a confident one. The Roadmap to Connection. This book is not about tricking people into liking you. It is not about being fake or loud. It is about becoming a high-agency communicator. That means being someone who sees a social situation as an opportunity rather than a threat. To get there, we are going to use a 3-step social framework. Mindset. We will start by fixing the way you think about talking. We will look at why we fear silence and how to turn off the mental rehearsing that makes you tired. We will learn from people like Eleanor Roosevelt, who was painfully shy as a child, but became one of the most powerful speakers in the world. Mechanics. This is the how-to part. We will talk about the first 7 seconds of a meeting. We will look at how to stand, how to smile, and how to use your eyes. We will learn the question ladder to keep a conversation going, and the 5 pillars of witty banter to make people laugh. We will even look at how to leave a conversation without feeling rude. Mastery. Once you have the basics, we will look at high-stakes situations. How do you talk to a VIP or a boss? How do you handle a conversational bully who keeps interrupting you? How do you turn a stranger into a real friend or even a soulmate? We will see how Benjamin Franklin used these secrets to win over the royal courts of France, and how Winston Churchill used the power of words to save a nation. By the end of this journey, you will have a social toolkit. You will know exactly what to do when you walk into a crowded room. You will know how to listen in a way that makes people feel like they are the only person in the world. The goal isn't to make you the loudest person at the party. The goal is to give you the freedom to be yourself, anywhere, with anyone. In 1977, humans sent a gold record into deep space on a ship called Voyager. On that record, they put greetings in 55 different languages. They put the sound of a mother kissing her child and the sound of a heartbeat. They did this because, at our core, the most human thing we can do is try to say, I am here, you are there, we are not alone. Every conversation is a chance to send that message. It is a chance to build a bridge. The kitchen at Leo's office is currently empty, and the coffee is brewing. It is time for him to stop waiting around the corner. Chapter 1. 7 Seconds to a First Impression. The human brain makes a decision about you before you even open your mouth. In fact, it happens in about 1/10 of a second. That is faster than the blink of an eye. In that tiny sliver of time, a stranger has already decided if you are someone to trust, someone to fear, or someone to ignore entirely. By the time 7 seconds have passed, their opinion of you is mostly set in stone. It feels unfair, but it is how we are wired to survive. For a long time we have been told not to judge a book by its cover. It is a nice thought, but it is a lie. Our ancestors survived because they could look at a person or an animal and instantly know if it was a threat. If they waited to get to know a mountain lion, they didn't live long enough to pass on their genes. Today, we don't face many mountain lions in the office or at a party, but our brains still use that same ancient hardware. We thin slice every person we meet, taking a tiny piece of information and using it to guess the rest of their story. The face of a president. In the fall of 1860, a man named Abraham Lincoln was running for president of the United States. Today, we see his face on a $5 bill and think of him as a hero. But back then, many people thought he looked strange. He was very tall and very thin. His face was full of deep lines, and his eyes often looked sad. Some people even called him homely or gaunt. In a time before television, people relied on drawings and early photos, and many voters weren't sure if this man looked like a leader. In Westfield, New York, an 11-year-old girl named Grace Bedell saw a picture of Lincoln. She liked him, but she noticed something. His face was so thin that it made him look a bit scary to some people. She sat down and wrote him a letter. She told him that his face was too thin and that he should grow whiskers. She wrote, "All the ladies like whiskers and they would tease their husbands to vote for you and then you would be president." Most famous men would have ignored a letter from a child, but Lincoln was different. He wrote back to her. He asked if people wouldn't think it was a piece of silly affection if he started growing a beard now, but he took her advice to heart. By the time he arrived in Washington, D.C. for his inauguration, he had grown the full, dark beard we all know today. The change was massive. The beard filled out his face. It made him look older, wiser, and more stable. It added a layer of gravity to his appearance. When he traveled through Westfield on his way to the White House, he asked to meet Grace. He found her in the crowd, kissed her, and said, "You see, I let these whiskers grow for you, Grace." Lincoln understood something very important. He didn't change who he was on the inside. He was still the same honest, brilliant man. But he changed the signal he was sending to the world. He realized that the first impression people had of him, his visual cover, was blocking them from seeing the book inside. The beard was a bridge. It helped people feel comfortable enough to listen to what he had to say. The myth of the slow build. Many of us believe a common myth about social skills. We think that if we are just ourselves, people will eventually see our value. We think the first few seconds don't matter, because the real us will come out later in the conversation. We tell ourselves that small talk and first impressions are shallow. But if the foundation of a bridge is shaky, no one wants to walk across it. If your first 7 seconds send the signal of, "I am nervous," "I am bored," or "I am unfriendly," the other person might never give you the 8th second. They aren't being mean. Their brain is just trying to save energy. It thinks, "This person doesn't seem like a good connection. Let's move on." This was the wall that Leo Vance hit every single morning. Leo worked as a software engineer in Seattle. He was a master of code. In his head, he was funny and observant. But in the physical world, Leo was almost invisible. When he walked into the Pour, his local coffee shop, he would stare at his shoes. He would mumble his order for a black coffee while looking at the pastry case. He felt that if he didn't draw attention to himself, he wouldn't be awkward. But by trying not to be awkward, he became a ghost. The baristas never remembered his name. Other customers would accidentally step in front of him in line because they didn't even notice he was there. Leo felt like he was living behind a thick pane of glass. He wanted to connect, but he didn't know how to start the bridge. He believed that he just wasn't born with the ability to stand out. He thought charisma was a magic power that only people like movie stars or politicians had. One Tuesday, Leo decided to try something different. He didn't try to be the life of the party. He just tried to change his first 7 seconds. As he walked toward the counter, he took a breath and lifted his chin. When the barista, a woman named Maya, looked up, Leo didn't look at his shoes. He looked her in the eyes and gave a small, genuine smile. "Good morning, Maya," he said. He had seen her name tag 100 times, but he had never used it. Maya paused. She actually looked at him. Not just at his order, but at him. "Good morning," she replied, sounding surprised. "The usual black coffee?" Leo felt a rush of heat in his chest. It was a tiny win, but it felt like he had just cracked the glass. By changing his initial signal, he had invited her into a conversation. He had laid the first stone of the foundation. He wasn't a ghost anymore. The 3-point scan. To make a great first impression, you don't need to be the most handsome person in the room or have the most expensive clothes. You just need to pass the brain's safety and warmth test. When we meet someone new, our subconscious mind asks two questions. Can I trust this person? And does this person like me? You can answer both of these questions without saying a single word by using the 3-point scan. This is a simple checklist you can run in your head every time you walk into a room or approach a person. The eyes. This is about more than just looking at someone. It is about eye contact with a purpose. When you look someone in the eye, it sends a signal of confidence and honesty. If you look away too quickly, you seem nervous or like you are hiding something. If you look at the floor, you seem low status. The trick is to look long enough to notice the color of the other person's eyes. This usually takes about 2 to 3 seconds. Just long enough to feel like a real connection, but not so long that it feels like a staring contest. The hands. This is the part most people forget. From an evolutionary standpoint, the hands are the most dangerous part of the body. They hold the rocks, the knives, or the spears. Even today, if we can't see someone's hands, we feel a strange sense of unease. This is why we often feel nervous around people who have their hands deep in their pockets or hidden behind their backs. To pass the safety test, keep your hands visible. Don't fidget with your phone or hide them under the table. Open, relaxed hands signal that you have nothing to hide. The smile. A smile is the universal "I am a friend" signal, but it has to be the right kind of smile. There is a big difference between a polite smile and a Duchenne smile. A polite smile only uses the muscles around the mouth. It looks fake because it is. A real smile reaches the eyes. It creates small wrinkles at the corners. This is the messenger of goodwill that Dale Carnegie talked about. Dale Carnegie grew up on a farm in Missouri. He spent his early years feeling like an outsider, much like Leo. When he moved to New York City to teach public speaking at the YMCA, he watched thousands of people try to make friends and close deals. He noticed that the people who were most successful weren't always the smartest or the best talkers. They were the people who looked like they were happy to be there. Carnegie once said that a smile costs nothing, but creates much. It enriches those who receive it, without impoverishing those who give it. He taught his students that their physical expression was the front door to their personality. If the door looks locked and barred, no one will knock. The science of thin slicing. You might wonder if it's shallow to focus so much on a smile or a gesture. To find out, a researcher at Princeton University named Alexander Todorov did a famous study. He showed people photos of faces for only 100 milliseconds. That is 1/10 of a second. He then asked them to judge the people in the photos on things like competence, trustworthiness, and likability. The amazing part wasn't just that people could make those judgments so fast. The amazing part was that when Todorov gave other people as much time as they wanted to look at the same photos, their judgments didn't really change. The snap judgment made in the first 10th of a second was almost identical to the judgment made after careful thought. This tells us that our thin slicing mechanism is incredibly powerful. We are making these calls all day long. When you walk into a job interview, the person across the desk has likely decided if they like you before you even sit down. When you approach someone at a party, they have decided if they want to talk to you before you finish saying hello. This isn't a reason to be afraid, it is a reason to be empowered. Is built in those first 7 seconds. You can stop worrying so much about what you are going to say 3 minutes into the conversation. You can focus your energy on the start. If you get the start right, the rest of the conversation will feel like it is moving downhill. You won't have to work as hard because the other person's brain has already tagged you as friend or high value. Building the foundation. Think of a conversation as a bridge. On one side of the river is your world, your thoughts, your feelings, and your experiences. On the other side is the other person's world. Small talk is the bridge that lets you cross over and see their side. But a bridge cannot float in the air. The first impression is that foundation. If you try to jump straight into a deep conversation without a good first impression, it feels like you are trying to walk on water. It's awkward, and people will pull away. But when you use the 3-point scan, you are driving the pilings into the riverbed. You are making the bridge safe to walk on. Leo Vance started to see this in action. After his small win at the coffee shop, he tried it at work. Normally, when he walked past a coworker in the hall, he would pretend to be very busy looking at his phone. He told himself he was just giving them space, but really, he was afraid of a cold interaction. This time, he saw Sarah, a project manager he had always wanted to talk to. Instead of looking at his phone, he tucked it into his pocket. Step 2, hands. As she got closer, he looked her in the eye. Step 1. Eyes. He gave her a quick, warm smile. Step 3. Smile. "Hey Sarah," he said as they passed. "Oh, hey Leo. Good luck on that launch today," she replied. She didn't stop to talk for an hour, it was only 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds changed the vibe of the office for Leo. He wasn't an invisible engineer anymore. He was a teammate. He had sent a signal of warmth, and he had received a signal of support in return. The noise of his anxiety was starting to fade, and he was beginning to hear the signal of connection. The smile first experiment. If you still aren't sure if this works, look at a study done in retail environments. Researchers watched how customers reacted to 2 different types of clerks. The first group of clerks were told to be efficient. They were polite, they did their jobs. When they were asked about their experience later, they rated the products as being higher quality. Think about that. A simple smile from a stranger made people think the clothes or the electronics were better. That is the power of a first impression. It colors everything that comes after it. When you master the first 7 seconds, you aren't just tricking people. You are being generous. You are taking the social burden off of the other person. Most people are just like Leo. They are a little bit nervous, a little bit shy, and they are waiting for someone else to give them the all-clear signal. When you provide that signal through your body language, you make them feel safe. You give them permission to be their best selves. The historical echo. Abraham Lincoln's beard became one of the most famous symbols in history. It helped turn a homely lawyer into a Father Abraham figure who could lead a nation through a war. But the beard wasn't the magic. The magic was Lincoln's willingness to listen and adapt. He understood that how he was perceived mattered just as much as what he knew. Today, we see this in every part of our lives. When a new app is launched, the user interface is the first impression. If the app is hard to look at or confusing to use in the first 7 seconds, we delete it. It doesn't matter if the code inside is the best in the world. When a speaker walks onto a stage, the way they stand before they even say, "Thank you," determines if the audience will listen to their message. We are all thing-slicing each other, all the time. You can view this as a threat, or you can view it as a tool. By taking control of your first 7 seconds, you stop being a victim of snap judgments and start being the architect of your own social life. You are no longer waiting for people to discover how great you are. The foundation is now laid. You know how to stand, where to put your hands, and how to use your eyes to signal warmth and trust. You have moved from being socially cautious to being a high-agency communicator. But once you have someone's attention, what do you do with it? Now that the front door is open, how do you step inside and keep the connection alive? We will look at the switch that turns on true charisma. We will see that natural-born talkers aren't born at all, they are made, one behavior at a time. Chapter 2. Charisma, the myth of the natural-born talker. Sam Shaw had exactly 20 minutes before the train arrived, and his chance would be gone. He stood on a crowded New York City subway platform in 1955. The air was thick, with the smell of old pennies and damp coats. Next to him stood a woman in a plain coat with her hair tucked away. Thousands of people brushed past her. They bumped her shoulders and stepped on her toes. Not a single person stopped. Not a single person asked for an autograph. To the rest of the world, she was just Norma Jean Baker. She was a quiet woman who looked like she might work in a bakery or a library. She was small, shy, and invisible. Sam Shaw, a famous photographer, watched her closely. He knew the secret. He knew that the most famous face in the world was hiding right next to him, and yet she was completely alone in the crowd. Norma Jean looked at Sam and smiled. She leaned in close so only he could hear her. "Do you want to see her?" she whispered. She didn't change her clothes. She didn't put on makeup. She didn't jump up and down or scream. Instead, she just changed her energy. She fluffed her hair a little bit. She straightened her back. She let a bright, glowing look wash over her face. She opened her eyes wide and looked at the world as if everything in it was a wonderful surprise. In less than 3 seconds, the subway platform changed. The air seemed to buzz. People 10 feet away stopped in their tracks. A man dropped his newspaper. A woman pointed and gasped. Within 1 minute, a huge crowd had swarmed around her. They were shouting her name. They were reaching out just to touch her coat. The invisible girl was gone. Marilyn Monroe had arrived. That afternoon, Marilyn Monroe proved something that most people refuse to believe. She proved that charisma is not something you are born with. It is not a gift from a fairy godmother. It is not written in your DNA like the color of your eyes or the shape of your ears. Charisma is a set of behaviors. It is a switch you can learn to flip. If the most famous woman in history could turn it on and off like a light bulb, then you can learn where the switch is located in your own life. The magnetic triangle. Most of us think that being magnetic means being the loudest person in the room. We think it means telling the best jokes or wearing the most expensive shoes. But if you look at the people who truly draw others in, they all share 3 specific traits. These 3 things work together like a triangle. If you have all 3, you become a person people can't help but notice. Presence, power, warmth. When you have presence, people feel like they are the only person in the world while they are talking to you. When you have power, people feel like you are someone who can get things done or protect them. When you have warmth, people feel safe and liked by you. If you have power but no warmth, you seem scary or mean. If you have warmth but no power, you seem nice, but people might overlook you. If you have both but no presence, people feel like you are fake or that you are looking over their shoulder for someone more important. But when you put them together, you create a kind of magic. The art of being here. The first part of the triangle is the hardest for most people in the modern world. It is presence. Think about the last time you talked to someone and you could tell they weren't really listening. Maybe their eyes were darting to their phone. Maybe they were nodding, but you could tell they were thinking about what they wanted to have for dinner. How did that make you feel? It probably made you feel small. It made you feel like a noise they were trying to ignore. Presence is the signal. It is the act of being 100% in the moment. When Marilyn Monroe flipped that switch on the subway, she didn't just look prettier. She became more there. She looked at the world with total focus. Most people spend their conversations mental rehearsing. While the other person is talking, they are busy in their own heads. They are thinking, what should I say next? Did I sound stupid just now? Is there something on my teeth? This internal noise is like static on a radio. It kills your charisma because people can feel your absence. They can sense that you are behind your eyes instead of out in the world with them. To build presence, you have to learn to quiet the noise. You have to focus on the person in front of you as if they are the most interesting mystery you have ever tried to solve. You don't need to be a genius to do this. You just need to be a witness. The secret of the turtle. In a small studio apartment in Seattle, Leo Vance was learning about the second part of the triangle. Power. Leo sat at his desk, the blue light of his laptop screen making his face look pale. He had just finished a long day of coding, but he wasn't looking at lines of computer language. He was looking at a video of himself. A few days earlier, Leo had recorded a Zoom meeting. He wanted to see why his boss always seemed to talk over him. As he watched the video, he felt a hot wave of shame. He didn't look like a senior software engineer. He looked like a turtle trying to hide in its own shell. On the screen, Leo saw himself hunching his shoulders. He saw his hands tucked under his thighs. Whenever he spoke, his voice was thin and quiet, and he ended his sentences like they were questions. He looked small. He looked like he was apologizing just for taking up space in the room. I look like I'm waiting to be kicked, Leo whispered to the empty room. He realized that his body was telling a story that his mouth didn't want to tell. Who was sending out a low power signal. In the world of animals, a dog that wants to show it isn't a threat will roll over on its back. In the world of humans, we do this by making ourselves small. We pull our arms in, we dip our chins, we avoid eye contact. Leo decided to try an experiment. He stood up and pushed his shoulders back. He imagined there was a string pulling the top of his head toward the ceiling. He took a deep breath and let his arms hang loosely at his sides. He looked in the mirror and tried to take up as much space as he could without being a bully. He didn't look mean. He just looked solid. For the first time in his life, Leo realized that charisma started with how he held his bones before he ever opened his mouth. The voice of the ugly duckling power is important, but it needs the third part of the triangle to work. Warmth. They are cold. To see how warmth can change the world, we have to look at a woman who was told her whole life that she was plain, shy, and completely without charm. Eleanor Roosevelt did not have a natural gift for talking. As a child, she was so shy that she would often hide when visitors came to the house. Her own mother called her the ugly duckling. She had a high-pitched, thin voice that sometimes shook when she was nervous. If you saw her in a crowd, you would have thought she was just like Norma Jean, someone to walk past without a second look. But Eleanor had a secret weapon. She had a deep, bottomless well of warmth. She truly cared about people. When she spoke to someone, she didn't just use her voice.